guess that means I need to go up here. Alright. If I turn this on, will I see what I've got up on the screen?
Supposedly. That's a whole.
How do I turn this on?
I've got to click.
Can I turn this on?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'll tell you what I'll do. How about if I do this? I'll just kind of look up there and you know how to turn that on? Maybe not.
Whip me around the electronics.
Fear not, fear not. I'm good. I'm good. I know it might mess up the sound but we'll work it out. My wife saw this. She knew what I was going to do. She said, "Is that a short devotional?" I said, "Well, we don't have to leave for Rocky Mount until 4 o'clock, so I think we've got enough time." But no, it's not that long, what I'm going to do. Turn your Bibles to Ecclesiastes 4. Ecclesiastes 4. Can I just step out here? Will that mess up the sound too much? That way I can look back up here and see what we've got, okay? Okay, that's good. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt referred to it as a day of infamy. And they declared war on the United States of America. I don't want to compare what we've gone through the last 2 years with COVID, but I nevertheless think that there's some lessons that we can learn. And there's just one lesson that I want us to learn as a result of some events that revolved around that time period. You know, this last couple of years have been really weird. Churches all over North America and probably all over the world have engaged in problems they never dreamed that they would engage in. Some of it has to do with logistics. How do we get our members in? How do we protect the Lord's Supper? How do we? And then on top of that, we got family, brothers and sisters in Christ that are bickering with one another about silly things, opinions. And we wonder, well, what can we do? What can we do? December 7, 1941, Japanese declared war on the United States in a little place called North Platte, Nebraska. Some of you may have heard about this. North Platte, Nebraska was a hub for the railroad, Northern Pacific. And trains would come through there all the time, and the people of North Platte heard 10 days following December 7th, they heard that there was going to be a train load of the Nebraska National Guard coming through on their way to California to begin engagement in the war in the South Pacific. One woman organized her friends, said, let's make some cookies and take them down to support our Nebraska boys. Well, there's a story about this written by a man by the name of Bob Green. And he wrote a story called Once Upon a Time. And he talked about all these troops that came through North Platte. Well, on that particular day, he was in search of the best that America ever was. And I've got this book and I read through it and I thought, wouldn't it be good for us to think about the best that the church ever was? And there's 2 senses about that, which I'll mention to you in just a moment. Well, this woman, Ray Wilson, she said, let's get our cookies together and take them down to support our Nebraska boys and Nebraska National Guard as they're on their way to engage in the war in the South Pacific. And they went down there, and one woman, she hollered back, "These aren't Nebraska boys. These are Kansas boys. What are we going to do?" And Ray Wilson said, "Well, I'm not taking my cookies home." And so they started passing out their cookies to these boys. When they got done, they said, "You know, we ought to do this again." And the station master said, "Well, if you want to, there's another train coming through tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And so they gathered up a bunch of ladies and snacks and stuff. And they began doing it so much that the Northern Pacific, they gave them their, well, here's a story where Ray Wilson, she organized women, literally, thousands of women that take care of these soldiers that came through. Northern Pacific gave them the restaurant for them to use, and they organized women, and when the trains would come in, they'd have hot coffee, and cookies, and cake, and different things, coffee and things of that nature. One woman said it was her job to make 10 angel food cakes every week from turkey eggs. Now keep in mind, everything was rationed at that time. And so they had to get really creative. They had to take from their own supplies and that sort of thing. And they would greet these soldiers, sailors, men on their way to basic training, and try to just a little bit of happiness for them. And so every time the train would stop, somebody would holler out, North Platte, and they'd already been prepared. They'd run off and they'd run into the North Platte canteen to get some refreshments and things of that nature. And the story was typically the same. Some young man would be traveling on that train, and they would holler out North Platte, and he would run inside and he'd say, you know, I saw girls that looked like my sisters and my cousins, and women that looked like my moms or my aunt, and they would give us cookies and coffee. And then when it was time to leave, they'd give us a hug. They'd say, we're praying for you, sailor. God bless you. That story's been repeated over and over, and they'd hop back on the train. This is a picture of actually a battle from the sea on Guadalcanal. Riley probably remembers one of our members that's gone on. He was actually in the battle at Guadalcanal, Ernie Carlson. And the story goes, and this author, he interviewed men that went through North Platte. And repeatedly they talked about how they'd be pinned down in a foxhole somewhere, middle of the night, mortar shells coming in, and someone would holler out, wouldn't it be great to be in North Platte for just 5 minutes? Professor R.B. DuPay was preaching someplace, and he told this story. And there was an elderly man on the back pew in his late 90s. As he began to tell the story, tears began to well up. And he just took a chance. He said, Quincy, have you ever heard of North Platte? And he nodded his head. He said, yeah. Have you ever been through there? He said, twice. Going and coming. And I can still taste the lemon cookies. Well, what's amazing about that story is just one lady. One lady made up her mind. She said, I'm going to do something. And if I was going to give you a title or something to remember about this, it would be the power of one. But it's one person that binds together with other people to accomplish good. I mentioned to you this morning, this is a great church. And the reason what makes this a great church is it is a church of Christ. But we need each other. And here in the midst of this crazy pandemic, when is it ever going to end? How many of us thought, a couple of years ago, 2 weeks, it'll be over 2 weeks. And then pretty soon, well, a couple of weeks. And I know there are political elements to it. I know all this stuff. I'm at the point, I don't know. I just know we're here and we're facing all this stuff and, whatever. What do we do? What do we do? Well, in the book of Ecclesiastes reminds us that we need each other. And Ray Wilson demonstrated that we're better together. And she organized literally thousands of women, mostly women, and they were able to serve over 6 million military personnel during World War II. 6 million. And just give them a little bit of love and a little bit of kindness that would cause a man in his late 90s that began to cry and say, I can still taste the lemon cookies. Do you think it was the lemon cookies that impressed him? It was the love that delivered those lemon cookies. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, here Solomon gives us a little nugget of wisdom that he's learned. He's been looking for the meaning of life, and he comes up short every time, but he figured this out. In Ecclesiastes 4, beginning at verse 9, 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls. For he who has no help, for he who has no one to help him up. Again, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? Though one may be overpowered by another, two can withstand it. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. I know we use that a lot for weddings and stuff like that, and that's okay. There's a great principle there. But this is talking about the power of unified friendship, companionship, fellowship. And that's what we have in the church. And in the church, we don't have time. And not that this has been an issue here, but it has been an issue someplace. We don't have time in the church to be victim. We don't have time in the church to assert our opinions about silly things. No mask, this, that. God bless you. Whatever you want to do in the realm of opinion, that's fine. There are some things to die for. But then there's a greater cause. There's a need for service. There's a need for commitment. There's a world that's lost and dying, and going to hell. People that are suffering in this life, and they will suffer in eternity if we don't get together. If, as a brotherhood, we don't unite and realize we're better together. We can't live our lives independent of one another. And so as I think about this woman, Ray Wilson, it all started with, let's go down and support our boys. Let's do what we can. Didn't seem like much. Just a few cookies for a few soldier boys. But it made the difference in the life of many, many individuals. What can we do in our little corner of the world? Well, we've got to be a faithful child of God. We've got to serve Him and honor Him. We've got to make sure that we do those things in accordance with His will. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. 1 John 2 and verse 3 said, now by this we do know that we know Him, if we keep His commandments. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. His commandments are not grievous. His commandments are not burdensome. He doesn't ask us to do the impossible. And among all those things, when we're honoring Him, we're going to be bound together because we have the same aim, we have the same goal, we have the same purpose, and we've got the same enemy, and it's not one another. They had the same enemy, and it wasn't one another. When we realize that, it changes everything. Perhaps this afternoon, are we going to have an invitation? Okay, did we have an invitation song?
Yes,
9:25. A 9:25. Perhaps this afternoon, it might be appropriate for you, right where you stand, to say, Lord, help me. Help me bind together with others. Help me, Lord, to push forward the idea that we need to be serving, we need to be spreading the gospel. Help me, Lord, to do that. It might be that there's some other need in your life, and we certainly want to help you with that as well. But whatever your need is, we invite you to come to Jesus while we stand and sing.
I am resolved no longer to linger, charmed by the world's delight. Thank